I don't feel comfortable judging. I mean, their best player is out. Whose best player is going to miss essentially an entire series and you feel like they're going to come through and win? This is no longer basketball heaven. When your best player is out for an extended period of time, it's going to be really, really, really tough. That was a rough one. The Warriors actually led at halftime, and then Minnesota dominated the second half, and specifically the third quarter. Warriors led by 2 at the half. It was 60-58 Warriors at half. And then the Minnesota Timberwolves outscored the Warriors by 22 points in the third quarter, 39-17. They built a 20-point lead going into the fourth. It hovered between 16 and like 21 for the majority of the fourth quarter until the Warriors and the T-Wolves waved the white flag. The bench mob ultimately made the final score a little more pretty for the Warriors than it should have been, 117-110 the final, but this game was over from like the 8-minute mark of the fourth quarter on. The Warriors offense, it goes cold in the second half after they put together their best offensive half of the series. They were amazing offensively in the first half, scoring 60 first-half points. Pretty difficult to see the Warriors doing that without Steph Curry, but they did it. They followed up, though, with a 17-point third quarter, and the numbers in the third quarter alone were pretty dang ugly. In the third, 17 points. Warriors were 7 for 19 from the field. They missed all of their 6 threes. They turned the ball over 7 times in that third quarter, and that paired with a 39-point third for the T-Wolves, where they go 15 for 23 from the field and 6 for 12 from downtown. And they turn the ball over 3 fewer times than the Warriors do. That was the game. That was the game right there. You lose by 7, but it more so felt like it should have been an 18, 16-point loss. You get outscored by 22 points in the third quarter. That was it. The Warriors won every other quarter in this basketball game. They won the first quarter by a point. They won the second quarter by a point. They won the fourth quarter by 13 points. A lot of that was the garbage time, but the one quarter the Warriors lost, they got absolutely blown off the court, 39-17 in the third quarter. What stands out from this game, first for Minnesota, was Anthony Edwards was absolutely amazing, particularly in the third quarter. He finishes with 30 points, 11 for 21 from the field, 6 of 11 from downtown. But in the third, he had 16 of his 30. He went 6 for 8 from the field, 3 for 5 from downtown. Every shot he was making, he was letting all of the fans sitting in the front row courtside know. He took over. The only reason he did not score more was because he picked up his third and fourth fouls in rapid succession in the back half of that third quarter. Picked up his fifth early in the fourth. Otherwise, he might have went for 35. He only played 33 minutes. 30 points in 33 minutes. That combined with Julius Randle's 31 and 5. Those two combined for 61 points, and you did not get a similar scoring punch from the Warriors' best offensive options. And considering Steph Curry is out, the Warriors' best offensive options were Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga, I thought, had himself a really, really nice first half. Much like every other Warrior, the second half was a lot more difficult, but Kuminga finishes with 23 points, got to the line 12 times, made 11 of them. Jimmy Butler, though, only scored 14 points, only got 9 shots up, and was a game worst, minus 30 in his 34 minutes and 22 seconds. If you're unfamiliar with the plus-minus statistic, it's when that singular player is on the court, how well does your team do? And in the case of Jimmy Butler tonight, when he was out there on the floor, 34 minutes and 22 seconds, the T-Wolves outscored the Warriors by 30 points. Where was playoff Jimmy in this one? For me, I think it's pretty simple. If the Warriors were going to win this game, they absolutely needed more from Jimmy Butler. That goes without saying. He was amazing in Game 3 when he scored 33 points and was flirting with the triple-double. I think he just wore down. I think he's tired. And I can't really blame him. We also got to remember that he injured himself. He got hurt early in that Houston series. At the time, Steve Kerr said if this was the regular season, he would have missed another week or two. We're now a couple weeks removed from that, but I imagine playing through it has slowed the healing process, and this is not to make an excuse for the Warriors. I think it's the reality. I mean, he played 43 minutes, Jimmy did 2 days ago, 34 minutes the game before in Game 2. That was the Warriors' blowout loss where he did not have to play much of the fourth. Played over 41 minutes in Game 1. Played nearly 45 minutes in the Game 7 win versus Houston. Played 42 minutes in Game 6 in that series. And these are every other day. We're talking about heavy minutes every other day for a 35-year-old coming off of an injury to his tailbone that I'm sure does not quite feel good yet. He's not going to use it as an excuse, but I guarantee you he is feeling it on every step he takes, and definitely every time he jumps into the air. Again, not an excuse. My read on the Jimmy Butler performance today isn't that he decided, you know what, I'm not going to shoot the basketball. I'm going to defer to the others. I'm not going to be aggressive because I don't think my team needs it. No, of course the team needs it. I think he physically might not have been capable of it. He's churned out really good performance after really good performance. And tonight it was one of his worst ones. Not because he missed every shot that he took. I mean, he only got 9 shots up. He was 5 for 9 from the field, scored 14 points, relatively efficient, right? 14 points on 9 shots. I just don't think he had it in him physically in this basketball game. And that is partly, I think, what has cost the Warriors in this series. They're now down 3-1, headed back to Minnesota for Game 5. They have to win 3 games in a row. Very likely at least one will be without Steph, maybe 2, hell, maybe all 3. We do not know. Steph Curry will be reevaluated on before that game tips off, and there's a chance that he could play. I would not count on it, though, if I'm the Warriors, based on the information that I've gathered. I don't know that for sure, but I personally would be surprised if he were to play in Game 5 on Wednesday. But part of, I think, what is hurting the Warriors in this series, and this also can explain perhaps the Steph Curry injury, is how long it took them to dispatch the Houston Rockets. They could have done it in 5. They could have done it in 6. Instead, they do it in 7. Every extra game, every extra minute, every extra second that Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green have to play, it takes a toll. And I'm not saying if the Warriors beat the Rockets in 5 or 6, maybe Steph doesn't get hurt. Who the hell knows what happens? But it's probably less likely. And maybe Jimmy Butler has more in the tank and more to offer on a game like today. Bottom line, you don't have Steph Curry. This doesn't feel like much of a fair fight. And I think what makes it so much more frustrating is the Minnesota Timberwolves, they feel awfully beatable. Credit to Minnesota. They've come in and they've taken care of business after they dropped Game 1. They've won 3 games in a row. Game 2 and tonight in Game 4 were pretty darn convincing. I thought their effort in Game 3, the effort wasn't terrible, but the way that they played was pretty darn bad. I mean, the Warriors had a 5-point lead in the fourth quarter of a playoff game against a really good team in Minnesota, who I thought coming into the series was a really good team, and the Warriors are doing that without Steph Curry. They ultimately came through down the stretch, specifically based on the greatness of Anthony Edwards, and they took care of business. But through 4 games, having watched the Warriors with Steph for the entire season, and specifically with Jimmy Butler post-trade deadline, this feels like a Minnesota team that if the Warriors were fully healthy would be able to take care of in 5 or 6 games, which is what is making this experience that much more frustrating for me, and I think for a lot of you guys out there. Minnesota's up 3-1, but they look awfully beatable, and I feel pretty confident that if Steph Curry was available, the Warriors would at the worst be up 3-1. They would have won Game 1 as they did. They probably would have won both Game 3 and 4. Who knows about Game 2 in Minnesota? But I think at the worst, the Warriors would be up 3-1. But you don't have your MVP, one of the top 10, hell, maybe top 5 players in NBA history. It's going to be incredibly challenging. And maybe this is a boring take. Frankly, a lot of, bye-bye Steve Kerr, a lot of this franchise doesn't know how to put shooters and any support to Steph Curry and all of that. I don't feel comfortable judging the result of this series and coming away with any kind of harsh criticism of the Warriors franchise. I mean, their best player is out. Whose best player is going to miss essentially an entire series and you feel like they're going to come through and win? Maybe the Warriors of the past would do that when they had Kevin Durant behind Steph, or when Kevin Durant went out and they still had Steph and Clay and Draymond and Iguodala and a much better Kevon Looney and Sean Livingston, right? And David West. Like, that's an entirely different story. But the Warriors were playing in basketball heaven, right? This is no longer basketball heaven. When your best player is out for an extended period of time, it's going to be really, really, really tough.